Lou, and was now apparently seeking a bride and being balked by the fact that all the young ladies were falling in love with him. Fleeing London, he had of course headed for the nearest rogue, Lucian. "I would be happy to choose a bride," Leander said, somewhat sharply. "I thought the world was full of females who only cared about money and title. Here I am, prepared to lay both at the feet of a suitable lady without reservation, if only she won't fall in love with me." "And they all do?" queried Beth sceptically. In her opinion, Leander Knollys was a little too high-flown in his manner to be taken seriously. Leander looked at her. "You seem a sensible woman. You wouldn't fall in love with me, would you?" Beth looked at him, really looked at him for the first time. She found she wasn't sure of the answer. At her hesitation, he groaned and leapt to his feet. He dragged Lucian up to stand beside him. "Look at us! I am not a particularly handsome man." Beth studied them. It was hardly a fair comparison, for Lucian was quite ridiculously good-looking. And that wasn't just her wifely partiality. Even when she had first seen him, when she'd feared and hated him, she'd compared him in her mind to a Greek god. He was over 6 foot, with clean-cut features, guinea gold curls, and beautiful eyes and lashes she coveted for their children. Lord Charrington was a head shorter. Though he was well-made and graceful, there was nothing remarkable about him except a slightly foreign air. That wasn't surprising, for he had been born and raised abroad. Beth wasn't sure what created the continental impression, for his clothes, speech and manners were all impeccably English. Perhaps it was the occasional eloquent gesture, the number of words he wrapped around a simple statement, or the quicksilver expressions which could flicker over his lean features. The average English gentleman was much less mobile. Apart from these mannerisms, he was quite ordinary. His hair was as plain a brown as her own, though he wore it in a wavy, rather long style, which was appealing in its very carelessness. But then there were his eyes. Whereas Beth's eyes were a simple blue, his were a strange pale colour, perhaps a light hazel. It was hard to tell in the candlelight. Slightly sunken and heavy-lidded, they still had a bright intensity which caught the attention, and, quite likely, the heart. They shone, and yet they contained shadows, suggesting hidden pains. Doubtless it was just a trick of their deep setting, but along with that continental flavour, it was an intriguing combination. He looked both different and wounded, and, she added to her surprise, dangerous. Not particularly physically dangerous, as Lucian was, but formidable in his secrets and his will. She shook off her thoughts, surely products of the late hour and the port she had drunk. "No, you're not particularly handsome," she said. "But I can see that a woman might easily lose her heart." "Enough," interrupted Lucian. "Do I have to throw him out?" Beth smiled at him. "I was about to add, if that heart is free." She turned to the Earl. "Tell me, my lord, why do you object to a young lady you are wooing falling in love with you? It would seem to be highly desirable." "Perhaps, if I'd settled on one yet." "Only perhaps?" He resumed his seat with a sigh, and she thought he would not answer. He was clearly uncomfortable with discussing his feelings. But then he said, "I seem to lack the capacity for romantic love. I've never experienced it, and so I doubt I ever will." He shrugged. "I can imagine nothing worse than to be bound for life to a woman who dotes on me, when I care rather less for her than I do my favourite horse." It was shockingly blunt, and Beth was silenced. She instinctively reached for Lucian's hand. It was Lucian who said, "I don't recollect that you have a reputation for celibacy." Leander looked up coolly. "What has that to say to anything? And did all these women fall in love with you?" Leander glanced at Beth. "I think we may wish to save this discussion for later." After a blank moment, Lucian laughed. "For fear of offending my lady's delicate ears. She'd have your balls." Leander looked shocked. "Lucian!" Beth exclaimed. "Just because I am a follower of Mary Wollstonecraft does not mean I will tolerate vulgarity." He met her eyes with a hint of challenge. "I've told you,